Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this Mobile World Live webinar. My name is Tim Green. I'm part of the Mobile World Live team, and I'll be moderating today's session on navigating the transition to autonomous networks, and it's sponsored by Cambridge Consultants. Before we get started, some very quick housekeeping. Today's session will be about 45 to 50 minutes long, and you can ask questions at any time, and we'd love you to do that. So if you want to submit a question, click on the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer your questions at the Q&A session at the end. And also, everyone who registered for today's session will get an email with a link to watch again or share with colleagues who couldn't make it. Okay, so on to today's topic. Imagine a cellular network that anticipates bottlenecks and self-configures for optimal performance and heals itself from outages, all without human intervention. This is, of course, the autonomous network, and it promises to revolutionize the way that telcos build, manage, and maintain their infrastructure. And unsurprisingly, MNOs are already committed to the concept. In fact, according to Capgemini, telcos anticipate investing an average of around $87 million in autonomous networks over the next 5 years. And more than 60% of them aim to reach level 3 autonomy or higher by 2028. So clearly, autonomous networks can deliver unprecedented in efficiency and cost savings, but also this is complex tech, and building and running these networks is fraught with challenges too. So there's opportunities and there's also challenges, and it's a very exciting topic. And so today we're going to have 3 experts taking a deep dive into it, and they are Stéphane and Rémy. He's the commercial director for connectivity at Cambridge Consultants. Dr. Dillon, she's the head of AI capability at Cambridge Consultants, and Sam Salih, who's the director of 5G and advanced services at TDC. So thank you all for joining us today. Let's crack on. So now it's hard to imagine that anyone watching this doesn't know what an autonomous network is, but let's, in the interest of giving a complete overview, start with a description. So Stéphane, why don't you kick us off and tell us what an autonomous network is, some of the technology behind it, and also the different levels of autonomy that a telco can achieve.
Absolutely, Tim. Thank you. Well, let's imagine a network that anticipates anomalies, configures itself for optimal performance, and heals itself from outages, and does all that without human intervention. That's an autonomous network. And by the way, it's not just for cellular networks, also apply to fiber optic networks, satellite constellations, or high aptitude platform. So there are indeed different level of autonomous network. Actually, there are 6. Level 0, we don't really mention it because most things are still manual, like operation and maintenance. But essentially, the system offers monitoring support, but still requires human intervention for active task management. So we really talk about level 1 to start with. And level 1 somehow boosts efficiency. Repetitive tasks are handled automatically based on a set configuration. And operations are simplified so that people can focus on more complex issues. It's described as having assisted operation and maintenance. Then you have level 2, and we start using AI to manage and maintain specific network areas. That's where the expression like self-adjustment to external changes starts to kick in, and you get more efficiency without comprehensive human oversight. The level 2 is defined as partial autonomy in the network. Then level 3 is where you start having what we call a conditional autonomous network. The system actively adapts to real-time changes in specific network areas. You get a lot more performance, but it's against a predefined goal, hence the reason why it's conditional. And the network can operate in a more optimal fashion with minimum human input. And then you go to level 4. The system intelligently makes decisions and manages the network in complex scenarios using predictive analytics. That's why it's defined as highly autonomous, and the performance and especially the customer experience becomes more optimized without manual intervention. And then you go to level 5, which is full autonomous network, which means no human intervention. The system is fully managing itself across its entire estate, covers each state of the life cycle automatically. And that's where you get best performance everywhere. So that's the kind of 6 levels of autonomy. Tim, you ask also where we are in terms of current level of adoption. You mentioned the Capgemini report as well, and I'm going to mention it as well here, because at the moment we're mostly around level 2. I reckon about 80% of the telco are still at initial levels of autonomy. But when we talk to our clients, I think I would say half of them will be at level 3 and above within 4 to 5 years. What's interesting to note, despite the fact we're still early level, level 2 has already shown positive results, especially from an energy perspective, where you see a significant energy use reduction, and the hope is to reduce that by even more over the next few years, and with higher level of automation. So that's where we are.
Yeah. How long will it be before anyone gets to level 5?
That's the big question. I think it's another 5 years to reach really level 3 and 4, and then obviously there's going to be other things to take into consideration in terms of new generation, different type of network that will talk together as well. So the complexity will be higher. But the key thing is to start looking at the foundation now, especially in making sure you have the right framework in place as we start talking about AI to go into this.
Okay, well, we'll get onto those topics later, but obviously this is complex stuff and it's expensive stuff, but there has to be benefits. So, Sam, if I'll turn to you, what's driving demand for autonomous networks, and what new services and opportunities could it open up for telcos?
Sure. So I think the drive for autonomous networks, I think, is really being driven by two key areas. The first is by the need to manage what are increasingly complex mobile networks that cost more to run than the previous generations did, but also then on the other side of it, increasing customer expectations that are driving telcos very much to then innovate into new areas. I think when we look at it from a complex network and increasing complexity of network and demands, it's where we're able to use it to drive kind of real operational efficiencies. So actually, how are we able to reduce the costs that we have in managing and maintaining networks that are getting more and more dense by automating some of the routine tasks and things like resource allocation that occurs at an operational level. As we start to then look at how some of that then grows into things that affect customers, this is where we start to see actually how things such as service quality and reliability can be improved as well. Customers increasingly are expecting, perfect uptime, perfect download, really, really fast speeds wherever they are. And actually, some customers increasingly, where they have, critical infrastructure requirements or services, will need greater levels of quality and guarantees available to them at all times. So actually, it's our ability then to use the AI that underpins autonomous networks to kind of drive real-time monitoring of the network, of how the network is operating, and proactively identify areas that may have challenges, but also it's to bring in self-healing capabilities. So actually, where particular users may have constraints due to network congestion, how can the network readjust itself dynamically in order to provide the right level for the different users? And that's kind of where it then drives us really through into some of those new service opportunities that we can provide. So if we look at areas such as utilities, where increasingly we're seeing more and more of the utility systems become digitalized, whether that's electricity grids, gas grids, renewables, actually those IoT solutions sit on the mobile networks that are being developed. And so making sure that they have the higher levels of security, the availability, and the service guarantees that we can provide through autonomous networks starts to become really, really important. Security is another one. And this is where, by having autonomous networks, we can kind of integrate really advanced security protocols using AI. So that actually it's no longer about, trying to clean up the mess after there's been a cyber attack, but it's being able to detect and respond to some of these threats in real time. And this really fits well with some of those critical infrastructure uses that we start to see as more and more sensitive data starts to run over that network, and the trust that that network needs to have by its users becomes really, really critical.
Okay, well, obviously there's a huge amount of benefit.
Tim, can I just add a point to what Sam's saying? I think I'd like to kind of link what we say in the first question and what Sam has just said, because it is complex, and I think one of the key things to make sure that as an operator, as a stakeholder, you're really clear about what you want to gain from the autonomous network, and has to ensure you get all the benefits that Sam has mentioned. We did touch upon that in our white paper, Get Ahead in the Race to Autonomous Network, but I just wanted to quickly, for instance, if you're looking at optimizing the network at level 2 or 3, it's about automation for congestion management, optimization, data traffic steering. So you can achieve the network efficiency and the customer experience and the operational cost reduction that Sam was talking about. If you want to go make more strides at level 3, then you look at automating network planning, deployment, optimization using AI and ML. And again, this translates into network rollouts and better performance and a more dynamic infrastructure. So you can create those really differentiating services. But the whole point is there's 5 levels of autonomy and they're quite complex, but to drive those benefits, you need to really, really understand where you want to go to get the benefits, as Sam has mentioned.
Okay. I'm going to stick with you, Stéphane, and then we're going to bring Maya in to talk a little bit about some of the AI and machine learning aspects of this. As Sam explained, there's obviously these compelling benefits, but you can't just build an autonomous network overnight and integrate it with all your systems. So what are the main challenges facing telcos that want to move into this area, Stéphane?
I think there are a few challenges, but I would look at first around legacy systems, because obviously many telco, many players, many stakeholders still use legacy systems that may not be compatible with autonomous network technologies. And upgrading these systems can be quite complex. There's no easy answer to this, but there are options like middleware solutions, for instance, to enable interoperability between legacy and modern system. There's also more exposure of API that can help in that sense. But that legacy and interoperability is one of the challenge. The technology maturity, or the understanding of where the maturity is quite important, because the technology required for fully autonomous network is evolving and will evolve. We touched upon this a bit earlier. And you need to invest in research and development to ensure that this technology will mature and integrate effectively in your system. So that it's bringing the successful deployment of your autonomous network. By maturity of technology, I really refer to the readiness of integration into operational environments. So it's really, for instance, if you think about AI and ML, is evolving at the speed light. The maturity levels differ. So the way you really need to look at it is you go around this by extensively training and validating your AI and ML models to ensure it's accurate and reliable. And if you do that successfully, then it will provide the benefits that Sam mentioned earlier. And operators that successfully integrate advanced technology to their network can offer superior service quality and attract more customers. But that's one of the critical challenge around this. Security and reliability, it's a no-brainer, unfortunately, but it's the autonomous network must be robust and trustworthy to handle all the tasks without human intervention. So that's another challenge to look at. Regulatory compliance as well, because it's quite a complex environment, and it's not just regulatory compliance around what we tend to see from my connectivity background. It's not just about connectivity; it's around data protection and privacy and all the requirements from a regulatory perspective that are attached to an autonomous network. And the one for me that's really critical as well is what is the AI framework around that? And that's one of the the big question for me. That's why I'm going to ask Maya maybe to join in, because she knows all about that.
Definitely happy to interject. But Tim, go ahead with your question.
No, I mean,
notes.
Stéphane, you're doing my job for me, so thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, obviously AI and machine learning, I know they're used interchangeably and they're not necessarily the same thing, but this is, central to the development of these new autonomous networks, this technology. So can you give us a brief kind of description of the technology, the AI technology underlining these networks, and then talk about some of the black blocks problem in AI decision making that always gets discussed when these topics come up, and how this applies to this particular topic?
Yeah. So in terms of individual AI applications and ML, when you're talking about autonomous networks, I'm not going to pin down into one thing, because autonomous networks are built of multiple structures and pieces. They are immensely complicated. You have layers upon layers of issues around everything from privacy, security, governance. But, long story short, you cannot have an autonomous network with some, form of AI enabling all of this. And there are a myriad of challenges. I think it begins with what is, Stéphane said it beautifully, what is it that you're actually trying to achieve from your network at any given point, right? I remember Sam telling me, and Stéphane told me a while ago, you cannot move fast and break things quickly when it comes to autonomous networks. And yeah, it makes complete sense. You cannot have things like critical infrastructure essentially breaking down. So how do you even begin to trial and test what your AI is capable of and the problems it's looking to actually solve? And how do you debug, deploy, train, test, apply governance, get insights from stakeholders? Some of those things, some of those challenges can be overcome with principles applied to AI sandboxing, for instance. So the notion of a sandbox isn't unfamiliar to anybody, I reckon, in the call. Do it for software development. It's no different in terms of principles around AI. In terms of making sure that you're, not tripping over yourself and breaking a multitude of things as you're trying to advance your network, it's an iterative approach that's super important. It's small AI solutions that prove themselves to be reliable. Then what you do is, when you talk about scale deployment or anything that involves actually taking it out into the wild, you need to have a reassessment of what it actually means in terms of compute, algorithms, and data. That has to happen each point. I'm going to take a very quick step back and actually say that this is a challenge for any area where AI and machine learning are actually applied. It's not just unique to telecommunications.
Yeah.
And with the 5 years that Stéphane said that autonomous networks are 5 years away, self-driving vehicles have been 5 years away for years. So I'm still waiting, although I would probably never get in one, but that's a different webinar. And having said this, the other challenges is around, as Sam touched on beautifully as well, is around the cybersecurity aspect. So I cut my teeth in cybersecurity. We did talk about, it's not about if something happens, but when. And in order to maintain integrity of the networks, and I'm talking about everything from data to privacy of users, one of the principles, or one of the myriad principles that are worthwhile applying, is are related to AI assurance. And when we talk about AI assurance, we're not just talking about compliance and governance and ethics, we're also talking about technical robustness here, and safety and security as well. And all of those different pieces need to be considered together. And sandboxing is a very good way of doing that. To answer your question around the differentiation between AI and ML, AI is the field, ML is the way that basically computers learn. Right. So the difference between the two key areas there is, with machine learning, classical machine learning, you're able to feature engineer. You're able to actually, as the data scientist, as the engineer, to have a better understanding of what it is that you're actually manipulating in terms of features and variables. Whereas AI itself, when you're actually moving into those advanced algorithms, it's doing it by itself, and you don't necessarily have an understanding of what is weighted and why the conclusions are drawn the way that they actually are, and the insights are actually surfaced. So when it actually comes to applying AI, one of the things that's also important around AI assurance is around that explainability aspect. And I will say something that seems to be a little bit controversial to say as a head of AI capability, which is, do you actually need AI for all of these, component aspects of an autonomous network? Yes, you can imagine when it comes to an orchestration layer, it's going to be super important, but maybe there is an aspect that requires just some simple machine learning, which is much more explainable. You can see what features and aspects and variables, what are the knobs and levers that have been pulled when it comes to actually surfacing insights there and actually making the system work. So I guess all of this, yes, it is complex, but breaking it down into pieces is actually doable. And all of it requires, again, to reiterate Stéphane's message, which is what it is that you're trying to achieve, how and by when, iterating over that, and actually beginning in a safe environment first, trialing and testing it before you roll it out.
Right.
So I think I answered a multitude of other questions there, but I hope that was helpful for the audience.
And I think this is something where it kind of, we've taken a very kind of technical approach to some of this, and we've slightly touched around some of the challenges that, whilst yes, some of them are very, very technical, there's also going to be very significant cultural challenges as well as we go across this, as we start to deploy some of these technologies and some of these new ways of working. This isn't just about, taking a technology or a way of working and simply implementing it into a business. The skill sets and the ways of working are very, very different. Often what you will find is, resistance from within some of the organizations that are meant to deploy these, who, may not be, up to date with how these technologies work. They may have, in some cases, legitimate fears around, displacement of jobs. The saying, the robots are coming for your jobs is something that has kind of been popularized quite a lot recently. And so actually there's, some of the preparation that needs to happen before you can even think to deploy many of these networks is actually how do we train and make sure that our people have got the right skills, that, when we start thinking about what does a cybersecurity look like, what are we trying to achieve? What do the models need to look like that we're putting into our networks? Actually, you've got people within your organizations that understand what those are and are able to work with those. And I think that's where some of what Maya said around, having pilot programs, doing those really iterative, slow, step-by-step, gradual implementations through sandboxing, as an example, it can be really effective, not just as a way of driving adoption of technology and the kind of the advancement of the networks, but actually from an internal and a skills perspective, making sure that you've got the right type of organization that is able to take those on. And I think that's then where some of the regulatory stuff becomes really, really important. Right now we're in a scenario where the technology is absolutely racing ahead of where people sit from a regulatory and compliance perspective. Yeah. And yes, they're catching up, and we're seeing some stuff come out from the EU, from the US, but there's still a lot of patchworking that's currently out there. And I think as we start to again get towards that more stable regulation and regulatory environment that exists, that will then give the various telco operators around Europe, as an example, that stability that they can start to build these models up. And as we start to build towards those autonomous networks, I think we'll then start to see a lot of sharing between the operators, certainly within Europe, but possibly the world, to get towards, in the same way that we have through things like 3GPP standards, a single standard. I think that's one of the things that will probably start to emerge over the next several years.
Which departments are going to be most impacted, do you think, by this balance of autonomous networks and legacy networks?
I think it's going to be quite a broad range, and broader than many people expect. You'll probably expect me to say that it's going to be the networks departments that are responsible for network planning and spectrum management and making sure things are fixed. And certainly there'll be impact there. But I think you'll see impact as well in areas on the more commercial side as well. in areas such as product and propositions, in service and support, where some of the actions that may have needed to be done, certainly from the service and support side, may not be needed anymore or may change. But actually from a products and propositions perspective, where the way that products are created, what those propositions are, suddenly it stops being about things that are physical first and then digital later, but actually you're flipping that on your head by having some of these capabilities in place. So I think we'll see quite a large shift in the skill sets required, both on the technical side, but also on the commercial side of these organizations.
Interesting. Okay, Stéphane.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something quickly to both points. Is that whilst it can be quite, seen as challenging, especially when we start talking about AI decision making and sandboxing. I think one of the benefits as well I see from that is it will drive trust among the regulators if you do it properly, but also your users as a commercial organization, because you'll have the right regulatory compliance in place that will increase the stakeholder confidence, and you will be able to make better informed decision. And all of that will definitely drive the trust among your users and regulators. And that's one of these kind of maybe less visible benefit that are not revenue or P&L based that are quite important. And that will drive that global piece of work that Sam was mentioning. And I wanted to add on the workforce. I think it's quite we're lucky at CC because we have we have hundreds and hundreds of very clever people that do deep tech and breathe in and out data every day. But it's clear from conversation we have with clients that the demand for the skills far exceeds the supply. And what I would encourage is that yes, it's absolutely paramount to train people, to retrain and make sure they upskill, because technology goes really quickly, as Sam was mentioning. But it's also important to collaborate. So not just with your traditional vendors, but with universities or engineering companies that can help you develop specialized learning and development program and create pipeline of skilled professionals. And you can outsource as well, but that's really key, again, because when you have a technically skilled workforce, then you can develop and implement new network capability, you can enable differentiated services, and ultimately you can tap into new revenue streams.
Yeah. Okay, Stéphane, I'm going to stick with you. We're obviously in this transition period now, and we will be for many years. What can telcos do to maintain service quality while they're moving from non-autonomous to autonomous networking?
You seem to only ask me the tricky question, Tim. It's I think I would just leave maybe 4 points for the audience to take away. I think the first one is, and Maya and Sam have hinted at it, is really invest in AI, machine learning, advanced analytics, not just because it's trendy, it's buzzwords, and they will definitely support the transition towards what I would call self-everything, so self-configuring, healing, etc., etc. But it also help reducing the human intervention. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it will replace human, but it will give more time and productivity capability to the workforce to do exactly what I said earlier, is really focus on things that can help drive differentiated services and tap into new revenue. So it's really that investment. It's not just an investment as an overlay. It's not just, hey, let's put a bit of AI here and there and gain 10% of whatever KPI I'm targeting. It really needs to go deep into the system. So that the investment in technology and people is very important. We touched upon it earlier. One of the challenges is how do we ensure the system are interoperable between new and legacy infrastructure? And again, this one is not an easy one, but there are conversations. If you look at some of the announcements from Mobile World Congress, for instance, earlier this year around ORAN and Open Gateway, that try and help or go towards facilitating that seamless integration and communication across different network components. going to repeat myself, but we've just talked about it. And I think by now we would all agree that it's important that people have embrace the right culture around autonomy, and that they are trained and retrained and upskilled to be able to manage and operate those autonomous network. It's really around adapting and adopting the new technology, but also the methodology. And then Maya mentioned it earlier, but I will repeat it as well, because I think it's very important, is the transition should be done incrementally. So you start by automating repetitive tasks, and then you gradually move towards something more complex around full autonomy. I like to call that, the kind of agile mindset. You can have really big ambition, but you need to start small, and then you iterate at the pace that works for your business. And that's really how you can try and ensure the service quality during that transition over the next few years.
If I may add to what Stéphane was saying, sorry.
No, I was going to ask you to chip in there. So, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so if I may add a little bit on to what Stéphane was saying, and just advance the conversation on a little bit further. When we talk about technology racing ahead, it's always going to do that. There's never a time in history when it hasn't raced ahead, and compliance and governance and all of those things haven't fallen at least 5 to 10 years behind. We're always going to find ourselves having to catch up. And yes, things are accelerating. And I do hear what we're saying about in terms of training people, educating people, key parts. And a key part in all of this, and Stéphane talked about it, and it's trust. And it's trust not just for the end users, but it's also for the organization, the senior stakeholders. We're talking about buy-in here, right? You can train people to the ends of the earth and certify them to the hilt, but if they don't believe in what they're actually doing, no one's going to adopt anything. You are always going to have that. So this cultural shift is more than technology. It's more than a business process. It's a mindset shift. And that is the same for whatever area you go in. I made a joke about about autonomous vehicles, and I wouldn't sit in one. There's this notion of, or this principle of algorithmic aversion, which is people being very suspicious around decisions made by technology, particularly AI, even if that decision is actually labeled as much more certain or more accurate. It's because as human beings, we already had difficulty trusting in each other's capability and skills, let alone something that's so separate from us. And we are looking to actually apply this type of technology at scale in every aspect of our lives. We've slowly warmed over to the fact that, AI is ubiquitous and pervasive. I wake up in the morning, my Alexa is on. There you go. No, she didn't ping. And there you go. And then I'm using my Google Maps to get into the office. And then Office, Microsoft Office has multiple AIs in there. I might have an idea about a blog and do it back and forth through ChatGPT. It's what I do on my day to day. And now I need to be sure that whatever, where I'm communicating with somebody else from the other side of the planet, which is clearly integral to my job, we're doing it here right now, is safe, secure, and private, but it's also something I do trust. And should something go wrong, I understand why it went wrong, and I'm not at the wrong end of that breach or that failure or that breakdown. And that requires me to have some experience of this technology in a way that's authentic to me, in the way that I want to use it. Like I say, it's a mindset shift. And that happens through, people who are developing and deploying these technologies to educate the end users, and also those who are developing the technology to be able to make it very clear how these technologies are developed. Trust is a huge part of all of this. It will make or break any organization in terms of their success of where they want to take autonomous networks. Because fundamentally, there's one other thing that we haven't touched on, and that's reputation, issues around reputation or reputational damage. We all want to move fast, break things. In other areas, that's possible. It's not something that you should be considering in telecommunications at all. But this iterative approach is not something that's actually going to hold back innovation. This responsible development, where you actually take a considered approach, I'm not talking about slowing down, I'm talking about taking a deep breath as to the what's and the whys, actually accelerates innovation. Yeah. And it's something that if you can actually explain the what's and the whys of of what you're doing and developing to the people who will not just be using your technology but investing in it, then that will actually help move things further along. It actually invites a cultural shift and adoption. It breeds trust. It actually develops that further. And maybe if you do apply these kinds of principles, autonomous networks would be 5 years away.
Yeah,
and I think that kind of that trust, I think, is really, really important, because it's without that trust and having that almost as that foundation that then allows you to then do a lot of that innovation and those small first steps and next steps and steps after, that then drives you towards that kind of autonomous networking in future. And kind of we've got sort of almost a 4-step framework of kind of how we can really embed that trust right at the beginning of what we do, and then create effectively that platform and that buy-in from across the business that then allows the innovation that drives some of that through. And I think for us, it is that first piece really is setting the foundation. It's making sure that the compliance, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable in terms of risk, is very much agreed by everybody on the outset. So whether that stakeholders not just within the business but also outside of the business as well. So it's making sure that we have we've engaged with regulatory bodies early, that we're engaging with our network and technology colleagues internally, but also with senior management. So you've got that really clear compliance framework that you can work from, that everybody has agreed to, and that kind of gives you that real foundation. Once you've then kind of done that, it's then sort of building the ethical frameworks that kind of come along the outside of that, so that when we start looking at, well, how do we deploy this particular piece of AI? Do we want the network to do this? What are we trying to achieve? We've got some really clear guidelines of kind of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And then it's going through that kind of continuous monitoring and evaluation of actually what is happening. Are we getting the results that we thought we were getting? Is this acting in the way that we want? Are we achieving the things that we want to achieve? Because actually sometimes we may have a certain hypothesis that we want to deploy, and we find that perhaps doesn't work. And all of that really comes down into developing and fostering a culture of responsible innovation, where you've kind of built in that trust that Maya was talking about, that kind of keeps everyone anchored. But you've then also got really clear frameworks and guides that anybody can look at and understand why the actions are being taken, why we're doing the things that we're doing, and how we're getting to the outcomes, and why those outcomes have been achieved. And that transparency that then has to be in place is what then helps kind of continue that trust as you go from some of those really simple first steps into those more complex and the stuff that is the stuff of the future that people sometimes are worried about. If you can take people on that journey, that's kind of when you can really start to make some proper steps forward.
Well, these are obviously issues that are going to be thrashed out in the public realm over the next few years, not just in telco, but in all sorts of areas. So we're obviously going to have a clearer idea of what the norms are as the decade wears on. Sam, I just want to quickly come back to you. We've talked a lot about the hypothetical challenges and so on. What about the real world examples that there are autonomous or semi-autonomous networks out there now? What are the real world examples of this technology in action and their impact so far?
So, like as sort of Stéphane said at the beginning, there aren't that many that are on kind of fully autonomous networks that exist, that are running off and have no people on them. I think for us, it's if we take from a network perspective, from an operational side to one side for a second and focus from it on a commercial angle, it's understanding kind of what we're trying to achieve. And I think this is where we'll start to see some real benefits for national critical infrastructure. So whether you're looking at things such as utilities, energy networks, defence, where actually these are worlds that don't move very quickly at all. Security is kind of number one. It's the watchword that they go by, and whatever they move to needs to kind of have that real assurance around how it operates. And as they become more digital, they require kind of connectivity that is similarly set up to respond to their needs in real time, but also to meet the kind of the high security needs that they've got, especially as things such as cyber attacks become more and more prevalent. As Maya said, it's not if, it's when. And making sure that your networks can respond to that will become really, really important. So I think it's as those sectors start to mature, we'll see the benefits from a commercial perspective for level 3 networks. We're already seeing some of it from a level 2 perspective, where we've got customers that are, taking advantage of priority on networks. They're taking advantage of having quality of service available to them. They're taking advantage of slicing. As we're seeing the use of slicing over 5G at the moment to provide connectivity to events and stadiums. And I think as you start to see that kind of go towards the more critical end, I think that's where you'll see the real benefits of the level 3 capabilities come into play.
Right.
And if I may, just to add to Sam, obviously because of the nature of the work we do, I can't name drop any customer, but just for the audience benefit, and we can follow up offline if they want more detail. Couple of examples of stuff we've done. So we're working on AI-driven neural receivers to enhance signal processing, reduce error rates, and improve network performance. So especially, we're already doing this within a 5G context, so to predict and optimize network behavior under various conditions. So that's linking to L2, L3. We also, going further, we integrate AI algorithm for inter-cell interference mitigation and neural receiver. So again, the view is to enhance network capacity and efficiency. And you will see that demand even more as heterogeneous network, or HETNET, easier to say, demand a more holistic approach, because the network organization will be more dynamic than static. So again, moving up the layer of L2, L3, L4. And we really work on these to minimize those interference. And lastly, something we've done for a customer in Asia a while back is dynamically managing cell loading and resource allocation to enhance the efficiency of the network. And that enabled them to deliver service faster and meet their customer needs that are very diverse much better. So that's the kind of things that, more from a deep tech perspective, which is what we do, we are already working on. And I will welcome any question from the audience or any follow-up to deep dive any of these topics.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Stéphane. So we're sort of we've had an amazing conversation, and we're probably overrunning, so that's on me for moderating. But we've got some time for attendee questions, and we've had a few in. So let's go through those. So the first one is, for network operators looking to embark on their journey towards autonomous networking, what practical steps and initial actions would you recommend for establishing a robust AI assurance framework? Maybe Maya can...
Sorry, I'm going to have to just quickly look at the question again. A robust AI assurance framework. What are the practical steps?
Yeah.
Depends where you are on your journey, I guess. So without knowing how mature or evolved your journey is, fundamentally, I would begin with the end in mind. Wherever I start, it would be, okay, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are the component aspects that make up that solution? How do they all fit in together? What are the interdependencies? And then you can go into things like you can start talking about governance and compliance and the legal side of things. Now, AI assurance, you can do it top down, bottom up, but fundamentally, you want to move it in from the direction of, this is what's expected from a human-centric design point of view, which is you have created a solution that's fit for purpose. The most of the audience here would be familiar with the concepts of human-centric design. It's not a brand new thing. It's been around for a long time, which is you create a product or a service that's just fit for purpose. It meets the needs of the user, no more, no less. And that's the other key part of AI. So am I actually creating a solution that actually meets the needs of the end user? If not, what else it needs to be done? What is lacking? What are the issues around it? You're almost moving into a kind of the world of a gap analysis. Where are we, and where do we actually want to move? How do we want to move forward? So we've started talking about governance and compliance, etc., from a high level overview, but you then actually want to start talking about things around security and privacy and technical robustness. And when we're talking about technical robustness, we're talking about things like model drift, accuracy, certainty, reliability of a model. AI models are on a POC kind of like stage, you can play around with these things and you can shut the laptop and leave it to one side, right? But when you are deploying at scale, these are living entities almost, if I may be so, inflammatory with the language there. They evolve with further data, which means that the algorithms and the way that the data is actually trained, they need human oversight. There needs to be an understanding of how basically the AI is performing. But at a fundamental level, before you even look at that, you're going to have to ask yourself some DevOps and MLOps questions, such as how am I making this process and development transparent, explainable? How am I managing the development of those models, and where am I actually recording all of this stuff? It's an audit exercise. I know it sounds so unsexy, but when it comes to transparency and explainability, you're literally trying to do that. You're trying to record iterated changes. I got there in the end, and you are needing to communicate that as well across your organization. So I would begin with almost like a fundamental gap analysis. What do I have? Where do I want to go? What do I have available in the pillars of AI assurance? What falls under the remit of things like governance and compliance? And we're talking about data governance and AI governance as well. So do I trust the data that my AI is built upon? If not, what else do I need to do there? How do I evolve this further? You may open a Pandora's box already by then, but let's put that to one side. It's a topic for a different webinar. The AI governance side of things is how much do I trust the output of the AI that I'm deploying? And then you want to talk about, well, how do I surface how the technology was developed? And if you can audit that, if you can record that and communicate that, the beauty of that process as well is that you actually start to develop trust. Because people can see where you're coming from and where you're going. You open it up for examination, cross-examination by various stakeholders, and you can actually put a pivot into the conversation to a point where you go, okay, what do we need to stop doing and what do we need to start doing? So I've thrown a few ideas out there. I hope that was helpful.
Great. Thank you very much. Sam, we've dipped in and out of the ethical dimension of this topic throughout the webinar. We have a question from an audience member asking about data integrity. So what strategies and practices should network operators adopt to ensure the integrity and quality of their data throughout the transition process?
Sure. I think the first one is actually having a really clear approach to what your data architecture and approach is. And I think Maya touched upon it really, really well. Of before you can even get towards AI, is actually what does your data architecture look like? What is the quality of the data that you've got coming in? Do you understand what that data is? Is it coming from the right places? Is it being stored in the right places and in the right way? Before you can even then start to look at kind of how stuff goes from there. And I think that kind of then comes back to, again, some of the more cultural bits around actually driving that kind of data-driven culture. So really, once you've kind of got that really clear architecture and data collection in place, you're able to understand if it's in the right place. Is it clean? If it's not, actually, how do you clean that data so that you can remove the errors, the duplicates, the inconsistencies, and actually that is something that AI can sometimes help with to get you to a really standardized place. And then it's maintaining that consistency as you start using that data, so that you're not having things change, which then may change the results that you get from your outputs and not know kind of why that happens. And it's then kind of, as Maya said, having that really clear transparency of, as data starts to flow through into models, you can see how it's being used, you can see what the outputs are, and you can always kind of go back to understand, well, this is what we changed, this is the output that we had. But making sure that you're very much data driven in how you come at things, and having that culture of transparency really drive that through.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we're pretty much at the end of our allotted time now. So it's such a fascinating topic, and thank you so much to all the experts for their comments. Stéphane, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted, I saw a question around collaboration and stakeholders. So very, very quickly, I just wanted to add that collaboration between the technology providers, the regulators, the operators is really critical for the success of autonomous network deployment. Technically, first, it ensures interoperability and adherence to standards, but it also can help overcome the diverse interest in the regulatory requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And we at CC, we really advocate establishing industry consortia, fostering continuous dialogue between all the stakeholders, because it will lead to reduced deployment cost and faster rollout of services, and that will increase innovation. There are initiatives already working on this that show how collaborative efforts can streamline processes and drive advancement. So by all means, that's something that I'm more than happy to also take offline if needed.
Okay, great. I want to thank Maya and Sam and Stéphane for all of their amazing insights, and thank you to Cambridge Consultants for sponsoring this session. I believe there's a white paper on autonomous networking. I presume that the viewers can download that from the Cambridge Consultants website. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So I urge you all to do that, and also to look out for the email with details on how to watch again or share with colleagues. And with that, I will say thanks once again to Maya, to Sam, and to Stéphane, and to you for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.